on Australia's business channel. This is Mediaweek.
Hello, welcome to the program. I'm Nigel Freitas. Ahead today, Tenner's getting a new breakfast show. It has a name, but no date just yet. The book launch of Killing Fairfax, but some say that brand is far from dead, plus big moves at Bauer Media in the world of magazines. But first up, the arrival of the royal baby has provided around-the-clock coverage for broadcasters, publishers and social media. After the birth was announced, activity on Twitter hit 25,000 tweets a minute. So how did the coverage rate? Was it justified? And which media sectors will make the most from it? Well, our co-host today, as always, is James Manning, the editor and publisher of Mediaweek, and he's here to tell us. So, James, looking at all that royal baby coverage and stacking that up against the audience numbers, was it worth it?
I don't know, I must admit I was a little bit underwhelmed by it. I mean, you said there was all those tweets. I mean, is that a good number? I'm not sure with Twitter, but I'm guessing that's a lot of tweets. But they can't, media companies haven't been successful monetising Twitter yet, I guess, have they? The TV figures, the news was pretty strong this week, but they certainly weren't royal wedding numbers. And of course, the royal wedding was one event. Everybody knew the time, and you could watch it. With this, it was unplanned, wasn't it? You never knew when it was going to happen. Yeah. The fact that it was very, 5:30 a.m. in the morning. A lot of people aren't out watching TV and stuff like that. So it didn't, even that day the breakfast TV audiences weren't massive. The evening news bulletins, they've been strong this week, but again, they weren't really anything out of the band we've seen them sort of trading in. I'm sure somebody will have some stats saying, look, they were up 10%, but that's not a massive jump. You can get that sort of coverage. For me, I hit the wall, as soon as the baby was born, that was it. I'd almost had enough. I was quite excited in the lead up until then. I think a lot of people were, but now it's happened. For me, that's it. There's no... let's move on. There's no real story there now. They've named it. So.
Well, the royal baby did quite well on Twitter, both when it was first born and now that the name has been announced as well. And I know that Facebook have been sending us stats as to, and Google as well, as to people searching for these terms. So online, definitely a lot of interest.
Yeah, big online traffic, I'm sure. But then again, a lot of media companies, that's nice for them, but they're not going to make a hell of a lot of money out of that. It'll help. But I think print, I was trying to get some print in the UK. The numbers have been crazy good. That the Times in particular does special souvenir wraparound covers now that seem to bump its circulation. They were talking about 50,000 extra sales, which is pretty good for them. In Australia, haven't been able to get any numbers yet. Look, I think they'll be up a little bit, not a lot. Magazine publishers, they were really going crazy. They're trying to get onto this bandwagon big time. With the first sort of baby fudders, if you like, we're going to see on magazines Friday this week with Who, OK, Woman's Day, New Idea are all doing like special royal baby editions, if you like. They don't really publish on Fridays anymore. They've cut back to 2 days a week now, magazine publishers, which is Monday and Thursday. So that they're sort of spending some extra money on a Friday distribution. And I'm sure they'll be hoping they get it back in bumper sales.
Well, I think one of the women's magazines have sent us a release saying this is a whole new opportunity for them in terms of royal baby coverage. So we will see, no doubt, some print inches. Now let's move on to other stories making news in media this week. News Corp Australia confirming that senior executive Brett Clegg returned to the company from rival Fairfax Media. James, this is an interesting story because it kind of happened out of the blue. Why did Brett Clegg go?
Yeah, well, it was a bit of a surprise, but then he did let out to one of his colleagues this week, look, this had been on the cards for a little while. I think it was because he sort of lost maybe a bit of seniority there. He was really running the Financial Review group, so the AFR, all their magazines, BRW, seemed to be doing reasonably well in it. In a challenging company in challenging times, but then that company was sort of merged in with a wider Fairfax business, if you like. I think he used to report to the CEO. That line of report was taken away and he was going through to, I think it was Alan Williams, who's come in there to run the sort of publishing business. So I think he was possibly unhappy about that, and I guess the overture was made, look, were you interested in coming back to News Limited, where he was there before, and he's going to be running their New South Wales businesses, I guess, which is basically, I think, the Daily Telegraph, the Daily Telegraph, the Sunday Tally. I don't think he's going to sort of have a role in the Australian, which is where he was working before he left, but I'm not certain yet.
Is that position a promotion from where he was before, or is it a similar kind of level?
At News Limited,
Yeah.
I think it's...
Or from Fairfax, from where he was at Fairfax to...
good question.
Like for like, maybe.
It's probably a bigger business. I mean, the tally generates a lot more revenue, so, and it's all about numbers, isn't it? So I guess it's a promotion, more responsibility. A very important part of News Corp Australia, as it is now, the Daily Telegraph and the Sunday Tally. So, and they're going through a big transition with their paywalls and stuff like that. So it's a very critical time to be getting that role.
Now, on the Fairfax side, what do we know about who's going to replace Brett Clegg?
Yeah, Sean Elmer, who was the editor-in-chief of the Sydney Morning Herald, he's come back, if you like, to the business side, or sort of running the business, which is, I don't know, is that a promotion from editor-in-chief of the Sydney Morning Herald? I'm not sure. It is, again, in financial terms, a very important role there. There's some speculation, we might have talked about on the show before, that the business feed, if you like, the business journalism from the Australian Financial Review will ultimately power all the Fairfax newspapers, so that will be sort of run into the business day sections of the Sydney Morning Herald and the Age. So he'll be sort of looking after that now. Who's running the Sydney Morning Herald? Well, Gary Linnell's sort of taken on an acting editor-in-chief role, but it's an odd structure a little bit. It's not a traditional newspaper structure at the Herald. You've got weekday editors, you've got a weekend editor, a Sunday editor, and there's also sort of news directors and stuff like that too.
Yeah, they did have those big restructures earlier this year. Now, if we stick with Fairfax, James Packer and Lachlan Murdoch attending the launch of Killing Fairfax. Now, this was a huge launch in terms of the personalities there, some really big names from media and business, but people are saying, James, it's a bit premature. Fairfax isn't quite dead yet. What do you think?
Yeah, well, you got in there, mate. I wasn't there. So you were telling me. It was a very impressive who's who, wasn't it? Get along. I mean, this is a book from Pamela Williams, had the cooperation of Lachlan Murdoch and James Packer. Alan Cole had launched the book, so three pretty big heavy hitters there. Yeah, look, it would have been nice to see a bit more of a fight back from Fairfax this week about, look, we're actually not dead. The Age did a little bit, but there wasn't a lot going. I think, but it's a hard place to be working at the moment, Fairfax. I think a lot of the journalists there are thinking, yeah, look, we hope we're not dead, but maybe now's not the time to come out. And there'll be some very interesting they'll be reporting soon, of course, for last half, or their full year, won't they? So I'm sure you'll be down there covering that. Very important figures. Maybe we need to wait to that to see they're not dead.
Absolutely. Well, let's get a check now on the media sector's performance on the share market this week. And to do that, we're joined by Evan Lucas from IG. Now, Evan, we heard a lot at the Killing Fairfax launch about three new media companies, Seek, REA and Car Sales, and these essentially sucked the ad business away from traditional media. Let's start with those traditional media stocks. Fairfax first. How's that been tracking this week?
Yeah, it's been a very, very sort of soft week again for Fairfax. A lot of people also on the analyst side really don't like the stock. As you and James just alluded to, Fairfax is still struggling to sort of generate the kind of income that the share probably wants to get. It continues to sort of fall around about to that 50-cent mark and just can't get any traction at all. And stories like what we saw today, although it didn't, yesterday, although it didn't sort of shift the actual share price itself, it's just another reiteration of what the market actually believes with the earnings going through Fairfax. They are coming out at the end of August with their full year results, and most are expecting it still to be weak, considering they were late to the game with the digital media, and they've only finally put on a metered system into their two mastheads in the Age and also the Sydney Morning Herald. So having a look at that traditional media side from a stock perspective, it's still struggling. And then if you compare it to a Seek, and also then obviously NN and Seek, which holds onto realestate.com.au, they're just so far behind. The earnings revenue stream that you get out of Seek and the way it's run, the margins that they abstract, is why you can see Seek over the last 12 months particularly has run up something along the lines of 25%. So they have really missed out on an area that they used to be well and truly strong into, and that's why we've seen the stock differentials changing so far in the other direction.
Now, Evan, on Seek, we know that they have successfully moved or captured this domestic market. They have big plans to venture overseas. Has the domestic growth all been priced into their share price, and how do you think they will fare overseas? It's very different.
Yeah, it's a very good question. In terms of, they do have almost a straight saturation with the market here in Australia. They have a few competitors, but they are very, very minor, and their software department here in Oz is very, very strong, and that means that they can basically price themselves into positions that they don't have to compete against competitors. Moving overseas, they do have a lot of target, particularly into Canada and the US. It's where they're really looking quite strongly, and considering who was backing them originally, it's not unsurprising to see why the Murdoch family and also the Packers have a very good sort of brief into that kind of area. It is a different market. It means you have to divide up through the states if you go into the US, and then the provinces also in Canada. So it is a different market. They'll have to do, and they are doing it. There's no doubt about that. The due diligence as to which markets they hit first will probably be the question, but they have already started moving over there. They do look at acquisitions quite strongly, and it is a good stock, and the more and more we see earnings coming out from overseas will benefit Seek. It means also they get the benefit of also having currency differentials put into those pricings as well. So it is a longer term story, but it may put some choppiness into the share price in the interim.
Now, Evan, just very quickly, in terms of a Network 10 or 10 Group, how are their shares tracking, especially after David Gingell's comments this week? There's only room for 2 networks here.
Yeah, and it was a very interesting sort of and fairly explosive sort of interview that David Gingell gave. He was talking about the fact that the sort of the additional 2 channels that 9 has, and the additional 2 channels that 7 had, are sort of pricing 10 way out of the market. It hasn't affected their share price as yet, but we have seen 10 coming right off since their high at the start of the year, back into the mid-20s, and they're continuing to find traction that's sort of fairly poor. And for that reason, yes, if there is more and more talk about two major commercial channels, it will be 10 that will be looked at quite heavily as being the ones that are underperforming on a constant basis.
All right, Evan, great update. Thank you.
Thanks, Nigel.
And after the break, we'll stay on 10. We'll hear from Adam Boland on the channel's new breakfast lineup.